Welcome to Lesson 4 of Module 5, Treatment Goals for Remediating the Consequences of Trauma. This lesson focuses on addressing survival behaviors of children and treatment goals in addressing the impact of trauma on development and mental health. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to identify and describe therapeutic strategies and interventions with children that establish feelings of emotional safety, build coping and regulatory skills, and readiness to process emotions related to traumatic experiences, and integrate therapeutic strategies that provide the healing environment for children to begin development of coping and self-regulation strategies. To begin, please click on the Start Course button located at the lower right portion of the screen. Let's start by talking about coping and survival behaviors. As you have already learned, when children have experienced complex trauma, their bodies, brains, and nervous systems adapt to protect them. They may engage in behaviors such as increased aggression, distrusting or disobeying adults, or dissociation. These responses, originally designed to protect, become habitual and grow strong from frequent use as they are repeatedly triggered due to being in a hyper-alert state. It takes time, safety, trust, love, and retraining to help children and youth replace those survival habits with adaptive coping skills. Let's begin by reviewing what happens with the hyperarousal continuum, also known as the fight, flight, or freeze responses. In the initial stages of threat, there is an alarm reaction activating responses that prepare the body for defense. If a child or youth faced with threat responds with a hyperarousal response, there will be a dramatic increase in activities in certain parts of the brain that regulate their arousal, vigilance, affect, behavioral irritability, locomotion, attention, sleep, and startle response. These systems in the brain will be reactivated when the child or youth is exposed to a specific reminder of the traumatic event. For example, the presence of their abuser, a smell associated with the event, or a particular sound. These parts of the brain may be reactivated when the child or youth simply thinks about or dreams about the traumatic event. Over time, these specific reminders may generalize. For example, the presence of the abuser may be generalized to any strange male. The stress response apparatus of the brain is activated again and again. Let's learn more about sensitization and tolerance from Dr. Bruce Perry, a psychiatrist and senior fellow of the Child Trauma Academy in Houston, Texas.
If you are lucky enough to have a normal stress response reactivity, and you are in an environment where there's a baseline level of arousal, you will have a linear response such that you'll be in an active alert state. And if you are exposed to a little bit of stressor, you can get into a low-level alarm state. And if you have extreme stress, you can get into the fear state. And of course, you can go up and down this curve depending upon the circumstances of the day or the week and so forth. So you and I, who have normal linear relationship between internal response and external challenge, external threat, external stress, will be on this line. Individuals who've had a sensitizing pattern of stress activation, in other words, kids that grow up in chaos, who grow up in unpredictable, threatening environments, who are exposed to a variety of either natural disasters or man-made disasters, and individuals who are victimized by abuse and neglect end up on this curve. And what that means is, even at baseline, in the absence of any external threat, their brain says that they are under attack. And what that means is they will think differently, they'll function differently, and they will behave differently. This, of course, underlies many of the observations of educators, caregivers, mental health professionals who work with children and adults who've been exposed to trauma.
As Dr. Perry discussed, Children and youth with trauma histories can very easily be moved from being mildly anxious to feeling threatened to being terrorized. Click each tab to hear some possible reactions we will see in a traumatized child who has developed a sensitized hyperarousal response. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network describes this process as follows. Children who have experienced complex trauma often have difficulty identifying, expressing, and managing emotions, and may have limited language for feeling states. They often internalize and/or externalize stress reactions and, as a result, may experience significant depression, anxiety, or anger. Their emotional responses may be unpredictable and, at times, explosive. A child may react to a reminder of a traumatic event with trembling, anger, sadness, or avoidance. For a child with a complex trauma history, reminders of various traumatic events may be throughout their environment. Such a child may react powerfully and have difficulty calming down when upset, becoming quite dysregulated. Since the traumas are often of an interpersonal nature, even mildly stressful interactions with others may serve as trauma reminders and trigger intense emotional responses. It is important to view the child's maladaptive emotional, behavioral, and cognitive problems as being rooted in the original adaptive response to a traumatic event. In addition to the arousal continuum, children and youth with complex trauma may also experience the dissociative continuum. At one end of this continuum are daydreaming and fantasy. These are mild dissociative experiences common to most people, which involve losing touch with conscious awareness of one's immediate surroundings. At another extreme is complex chronic dissociation, which may result in serious impairment or inability to function. These responses include derealization and depersonalization. Derealization is a condition in which one feels that the world around them does not exist or exists on its own, a sense of detachment from one's surroundings. Depersonalization is a condition in which one experiences detachment from oneself and a sense that the individual is not a person with a set of feelings, emotions, thoughts, sensations, and physical activity. Let's listen to Bruce Perry discuss the dissociative continuum.
Some of the common signs and symptoms that go along with dissociation involve avoidance and numbing and overcompliance, a sense of derealization, and you feel like you're watching things happen to you. This is where the kind of robotic, non-emotional responses can be seen sometimes. And it's also one of the very common presentations in profound dissociation is hearing voices and hallucinatory phenomenon that get these individuals frequently mislabeled as having some kind of psychotic disorder. Now, the more common set of signs and symptoms that people are familiar with around trauma involve this hyperarousal continuum. So this hypervigilance and impulsivity and high resting heart rates and the things that go with externalizing behaviors. In general, there are different factors that will determine what the balance is between a dissociative and arousal response. If you are an adult and you have the ability to fight and flee, and you are in a situation that is escapable, you can use that fight or flight response. In contrast, if you're an infant and you are unable to fight or flee, you use the infant's equivalent of that response, which is to cry and hope that somebody will come and fight for you or flee with you. But if that doesn't happen, you will dissociate. And these are very protective. So, depending upon your gender, depending upon the nature of the trauma, depending upon your developmental age, you will have a different tendency to use this combination of adaptive styles differently.
While disassociation is an adaptive response to traumatic stressors for children, it may be viewed as oppositional defiant behavior when it is triggered in non-traumatic situations. How might freezing occur and be interpreted as oppositional defiant behavior? Click the numbers in order to hear the hypothetical example of Jade. It is important to remember that children and youth with complex trauma live with an assumption of danger. This assumption results in feelings of powerlessness, difficulty handling unexpected transitions, feeling vulnerable, threatened, or attacked, and being mistrustful of intimacy and positive attention. Children and youth will develop their own strategies to meet their physical, emotional, and relational needs. These strategies will continue even when removed from the trauma. These might include behaviors such as hoarding or stealing food, self-stimulating behaviors, sexualized behavior, poor physical boundaries, negative attention seeking, or manipulative behavior to control the environment. These triggered behaviors can create significant difficulties for learning and create challenges for educators, especially when adults don't understand that the behavior is not willful. It may be unclear what triggers a student in any given situation, but it is important to remain calm when it is clear that the student is in a heightened state of alert. A student may seem oppositional because their flight, fight, or freeze response has kicked in. Remember, these students often live with an assumption of danger. When threatened, they may not feel safe within the classroom. It is important to remember that they are no longer using their prefrontal cortex to make decisions and are therefore not responsive to what is being taught or directives that are given. Students cannot learn or respond effectively in this heightened and unregulated state. When a student is in this state, it is important to respond in a way that won't escalate the situation. Some general guidelines include: stay calm. Be the thermostat, not the thermometer. Remember that you can't control the student's behavior, only how you respond. Quit taking it personally. The behavior is not about you. Give the student personal space. Remember that a student's belongings are an extension of them. Avoid power struggles. The goal is to help the child to become regulated. Offer choices so the student feels more control. They might need options for alternate spaces to go either within the classroom, for example, calm down corner or regulation station, or another location in the building, for example, school counselor's office or a walk to the water fountain. Once you can engage in conversation, use open-ended questions such as, "How can I support you?" or "What can I do to help you right now?" Now, let's focus on what school personnel can do for their students who have experienced trauma. With the help of supporting, caring adults, children and youth can and do recover from trauma. The school personnel's task is to help diminish the need for the defensive responses, while building the capacity for trust and skills for self-regulation and problem-solving. Click on each number to learn about goals for school personnel. When you've finished, click Continue. Goal 1. Understand trauma's impact. A part of educating teachers is to help them understand that they will likely need to learn new strategies to help the students heal from trauma and learn new skills for dealing with its impact. Some teachers are reluctant to accept the need for promoting felt safety, that is, calm corners, peace zones, safe spaces, etc. What might you say to encourage a teacher to integrate new techniques into their classroom?